So in my lifetime, I have seen organizations go from a very paternalistic, we're going to take care of you, you work here cradle to grave mentality to one that people have much more loyalty to their careers and their career path than they do to um, the organization itself that hires them, that is their first job. Most people I know have multiple employers that they've had over the course of their career. I've had five, if I don't count temporary work that I've done. I had one, two, three, four, five jobs before I started my MBA, which I started at around 30. And then I had three different jobs in academia. Um, After I graduated with my PhD, I worked for a year as a visiting professor. I worked 4 years at another school, and the last bunch of years here at SIUE. And it's probably the longest I've stayed at any employer for a variety of reasons, which I won't get into. But I love this place. I love this school, and of course, have I'm completely happy being here the 18 years that I have been. So if, a lot of times, and I'm bringing this up because a lot of times organizations want your loyalty. They want, you've got to be loyal to us, and you've got to be a team player, and you've got to do all these things. But when push comes to shove, the tables are turned. There isn't loyalty coming from the organization to make sure that employees get the rights and benefits that they need. They don't treat them fairly in terms of hours and working conditions. I mean, how many times have we seen, these things in, world's worst boss emails or world's worst boss texts like, yeah, I know you're sick on your deathbed, but you need to come in and cover so-and-so shift tomorrow, that sort of thing. This notion that people um, are owed, you owe your life to the organization, and we don't. We don't owe our life to our organization. We do not and should not be working 24/7 for somebody, and we need to have really healthy boundaries around when I want to do work and when I don't. I mean, it's one thing if you're a salaried, higher level employee in the company, then those expectations might be a little bit different, where you might, flex yourself to be there to get the job done, whatever it takes. Alternatively, those of us, those that are in the lower level of the hierarchy, we don't owe the company 24/7 access to us. We don't get paid enough money to justify having 24/7 access to us. And so we have to be clear with employers that while we are happy to be team players when we are being treated fairly and appropriately and financially well when it comes to compensation, we're not going to give all of our free time to the company because that's burnout. And burnout causes disengagement, and disengagement causes people to turn over and to leave. So it costs the company more. So they think they're saving money in the short run, but in the long haul, they are really harming people, not able to do the work that they want and need to have done. So if paternalism just doesn't exist anymore, if you're lucky enough to find a company that really does care, that's wonderful. And I wouldn't call that paternalistic either. I call that just good employment, right? And a good employer. But we don't have that sense of paternalism anymore. And that was something that was really profound for me as I was started and entered the job market. It was very paternalistic at first and shifted very quickly. And it was a hard slap upside the head when organizations started doing a lot of downsizing and outsourcing of skills, and people felt like this was a horrible offense to them. That how could the organization do this to me? I've worked for them loyally for so many years. I really put my heart and soul, blah, 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 blah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. The bottom line, the pressure to have the bottom line is important, but also the pressure to do things right. A lot of those organizations were bloated, and they were not providing good support for organizations. They were not competing appropriately in the marketplace. They were not adapting as they needed to in the marketplace. And because of that, they were too bloated with bureaucracy. They were too bloated and heavy handed with people who were doing redundant work. And then we realized that we needed to be leaner and more efficient and effective in what we do. So I'm not saying that downsizing and outsourcing is necessarily a bad thing, because it's not. It's not true. I absolutely believe there are moments when downsizing and outsourcing has to happen, particularly if you've got an underperforming division that is not responding to interventions, or you have a product that is just not selling and nobody wants to buy it. Well, how do we deal with that? Well, we need to figure out, how do we turn around and make a product or service that works for people. For those of you that are in marketing, you may have heard of this thing called the BCG matrix. And the BCG matrix is really a great toolkit for how do we decide where we divest and where we invest. So when we have, divisions that are just not performing well and may never perform well, we want to divest them. If we have some that we're really not sure what's going on, we probably need to invest a little bit in there to figure out how we can get them to be better performing. But we want to also be careful of not putting, good money after bad. For those of you that have taken the decision-making class, you've probably heard that our discussion about sunk cost bias or escalation of commitment. Those are basically the same thing. A sunk cost bias is where we assume that previous investments we made are weighted as important as the current investments that we're being asked to make. And we do not want to keep escalating by putting more and more money into a project that is just not going anywhere. So obviously we've got to find where that line is between a little bit of investment helps, or we don't want to be investing anything because we're not going anywhere fast. So the notion, I guess we said, about cradle to grave is just no longer exists. Most employees will change probably every 2 to 3 years. And usually it's because they want to invest in skill development or advancement in the company. Some of it's for just personal reasons, because people will leave bosses that they don't like. So they might go to a similar company in the same industry, but go to a company that maybe has better management team. The other thing that continues to be an issue is the cost sharing of health benefits. In all honesty, the Affordable Care Act did make some changes to the way people think about offering benefits to people and their employees. And that did help make benefits more accessible for people. But truly, I remember a time when I never had to pay for my healthcare benefits. My company paid for them in total. And in fact, I had a really good insurance, in which case I had a small deductible, and then it was 100% coverage after that. So I never worried about healthcare costs. It was just a non-issue for me. And nowadays I have to think about it. The co-pays are getting larger. The things that insurance companies are covering are not they're not covering anymore. Insurance companies are making healthcare decisions, not doctors and nurses. So there's a huge change going on in the healthcare field that is affecting the cost of our benefits. And in order to make it work, the only way we're going to get even halfway decent coverage is through cost sharing, assuming that we don't go forward to what we call socialized medicine or single payer plans. And again, I'm not here to debate what's right or wrong in that front. What I think personally should happen is not relevant, but really just recognizing that it's very hard to convince people that a single payer plan will work, because there are some downsides to it. There are plenty of plus sides, but there are also some downsides to it, right? And on the other hand, how do you convince somebody that it's not a good idea, right? I don't know. I could get on a soapbox about this for a long time, but ultimately, here in the United States, it's going to take a lot for us to be convinced to let go of our individual policies and the way that we can control our healthcare within our policies, as opposed to what can and does happen in a single payer plan. So pros and cons, and a tough debate. So the only way it's being managed right now is for us to pay part of the cost. So we pay not only the cost for our healthcare benefits, but we're also having to pay larger copays and larger proportions of our medical care. It is surprising that we're really the only westernized country that has people going into medical debt and bankruptcy because of medical debt. And that's kind of a sad thing to think about, but I will get off that soapbox and let that lie. The overall lesson to take away, though, on paternalism is just realistically that no longer do we look to the employer as that, lovely, happy grandfather that pats us on the head and takes good care of us. We are responsible for our careers. We are responsible for our career paths. And employers are just a way for employees to treat to be have a means to an end. If you think about it that way. I want to develop my skills, so I'm going to go work for this organization where I'm going to develop my skills. And lest you think that that's kind of mercenary, the same mentality is happening on the side of the employer. They are looking at situations and they're saying, yes, this is, I'm going to use this employee for a while. I'm going to have them work here. If they leave, there's another person that can replace them, and another person will come along, and will be able to do the work. I mean, it would be nice if we could change the nature of those relationships. And there are companies that have changed the nature of those relationships, but I think most organizations don't invest in people in the same way, I think the way they used to. But if I'm wrong, I would love to hear your ideas about this. Put it in the questions and answers section. Let me know what your company is doing. Are they a good cradle to grave employer? Are they people who really care about you, that they're willing to invest in you, and that they treat you fairly? I would love to hear that.